March 19th, 1944. 14:23 hours. Rackheath Airfield, England. Captain Thomas Briggs stood beside runway 27 watching a B-24 Liberator named Devil's Daughter circle overhead at 3,000 feet. The bomber's bomb bay doors hung open. Hydraulic fluid streamed behind the aircraft like arterial blood. The afternoon sky was grey. The wind smelled of rain and aviation fuel. 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engines laboured under the strain of extended flight. The sound carried across the airfield in waves. Devil's Daughter had taken flak over Bremen. Direct hit to the bomb bay. Hydraulic lines severed. Landing gear would not extend. 11 men aboard. The pilot had been circling for 40 minutes trying manual extension procedures. Nothing worked. The tower was ordering bailout or belly landing. Both options were death sentences. Maybe not for the crew, probably for the aircraft, possibly for both. Briggs watched hydraulic fluid catch sunlight as it streamed from the bomber's belly. Red fluid, petroleum-based. Pressurized to 1,500 pounds per square inch when the system was intact. Now it was just liquid falling toward English farmland at terminal velocity. The bomber had been hemorrhaging hydraulic pressure for 6 hours. Since the flak hit over Germany. The crew had nursed it across the North Sea, across the English coast, all the way to Rackheath. But you cannot land a B-24 without landing gear. Not safely. Tower radio crackled across the airfield speakers. Devil's Daughter, this is Rackheath Tower. Recommend crew bailout. Repeat, recommend crew bailout. Your fuel state is critical. The response came back tired, scared. Tower, Devil's Daughter. Request alternatives. We have wounded aboard. Co-pilot took shrapnel. Bombardier has leg wound. Bailout could kill them. Copy. Devil's Daughter. Standby. But there was no standby. There were no alternatives. Not in the manual. Briggs knew the statistics. He had memorized them because statistics were facts, and facts kept you alive. Between January and March 1944, the 8th Air Force had lost 43 B-24 Liberators to landing gear failures across England, not from German fighters, not from flak, from mechanical failures that killed crews on friendly runways after they survived combat. 217 aircrew killed or injured in landing accidents. That was more casualties than some bomb groups took over Germany. The math was brutal and simple. Belly landing meant 32% crew fatality rate. Impact forces crushed cockpit sections. Fuel tanks ruptured. Fire consumed aluminum airframes in seconds. If you were lucky, you walked away with broken bones. If you were unlucky, you burned. Bailout was safer for the crew but meant losing the aircraft. A B-24 cost $267,000. America was building them fast, but not fast enough to throw them away over England. Standard doctrine was clear. Hydraulic. Failure with no manual extension meant bailout or controlled belly landing. Pick your poison. Both options accepted the aircraft as lost. The only question was whether you lost the crew too. The problem was the B-24's hydraulic system design. The main hydraulic lines ran through the bomb bay. Exposed. Vulnerable. When German flak hit the bomb bay, it punctured hydraulic lines. Pressure dropped. Landing gear lost extension force. The gear assemblies weighed approximately 700 pounds each. Main gear assemblies. Nose gear weighed 200 pounds. Without hydraulic pressure, spring tension and mechanical resistance kept them locked in the retracted position. Manual extension systems existed, but required intact mechanical linkages. Flak damaged linkages. Manual extension failed. Engineering knew about the problem. Wright Field had studied it, recommended redesigning hydraulic routing, moving lines inside protected sections of the airframe. But that required factory modifications. Retrofitting existing aircraft would take months, would ground dozens of bombers. The 8th Air Force needed every aircraft for the invasion build-up. D-Day was coming. Nobody knew when, but everybody knew it was close. Grounding bombers for hydraulic modifications was unacceptable. So crews kept dying on English runways. Good men who survived Bremen and Stuttgart and Berlin, who fought through flak and fighters and got their bombers home, who died because landing gear would not extend. Briggs watched Devil's Daughter circle, watched 11 men burn fuel, watched time run out. He was 31 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 162 pounds. Brown hair cut short under his officer's cap. His face was weathered from years in Oklahoma sun. His hands were calloused from working on aircraft engines before the war. He did not look like a captain, did not look like someone who would change how the Army Air Force handled hydraulic emergencies. Thomas Eugene Briggs, born June 14, 1912, Durant, Oklahoma, farming community, population 3,000. His father, Robert Briggs, owned a crop dusting business, 3 aircraft, 2 Stearman biplanes, and 1 Piper Cub. The business was barely profitable. Oklahoma farmers could not afford much, but they needed crop dusting to survive. Boll weevils destroyed cotton crops. Pesticide application from aircraft was the only solution. Tommy started flying at age 14, 1927. No formal training. His father took him up, showed him controls. Let him feel how the aircraft responded. By the 3rd flight, Tommy was making turns. By the 10th flight, he was landing. His father said Tommy had natural feel for flight, could sense what an aircraft wanted to do before it did it. By age 21, Tommy had logged 1,600 hours, all crop dusting, all dangerous flying. Oklahoma in summer meant thermals, unpredictable winds, downdrafts that slammed aircraft into fields. Crop dusting meant flying 50 feet above crops. Low altitude, no margin for error. If your engine quit, you had 3 seconds to find a place to land. Tommy made 4 forced landings before age 25, walked away from all 4. Other crop dusters called him lucky. His father said luck was preparation meeting opportunity. Tommy understood aircraft in ways flight school never taught. He understood weight and balance by feeling how aircraft handled with different pesticide loads. He understood aerodynamics by watching how wind affected crop dusting patterns. He understood emergency procedures by surviving emergencies nobody trained for. One incident became local legend. July 1936. Tommy was 24. Flying a Stearman loaded with pesticide. Engine fire at 400 feet. Fire was spreading fast, consuming engine cowling. Tommy had seconds before fire reached fuel tank. No time to climb, no time to turn back to runway. Only option was straight ahead forced landing. But straight ahead was forest, trees, death. Tommy saw a creek bed. 50 yards ahead. Dry. Rocky. Not much wider than his wingspan. He aimed for it. Dropped the Stearman into the creek bed at 90 miles per hour. Wings clipped trees on both sides, tore off fabric, bent struts. But the fuselage stayed intact. Tommy walked away. Aircraft was repairable. His father asked him how he stayed calm. Tommy said he did not have time for fear. Fear happened after you survived. That was Tommy Briggs. Practical, methodical. Did not panic. He joined the Army Air Force December 1942. Age 29, older than most recruits. But his flight hours impressed the recruiters. 4,200 hours, more than most instructors. They sent him to flight evaluation, gave him complex aircraft to fly, watched how he handled them. Instructors noted he used unconventional techniques but got exceptional results. He did not fly by the book. He flew by physics. They assigned him to test pilot program at Wright Field, Ohio, January 1943. His job was evaluating damaged aircraft returned from combat, bombers with battle damage, fighters with engine problems. Engineering wanted to know, can this aircraft be repaired, or should it be scrapped? Most test pilots were conservative. If an aircraft showed structural damage, they recommended scrapping. Safe choice. Nobody got court-martialed for being cautious. But Briggs saw waste. Saw aircraft that could still fly being sent to salvage yards. He started testing damaged aircraft more aggressively, proving they could fly. Over 18 months, he saved 37 bombers. Proved they were airworthy. Got them back to squadrons. Some officers questioned his methods. said he took unnecessary risks. Briggs did not argue, just pointed to results. 37 aircraft flying combat missions instead of sitting in salvage yards. That was 18 months of additional bombing capacity. That was crew survivability, when regular aircraft were shot down and replacements were available. February 1944, Briggs transferred to Rackheath, assigned as operations test pilot for the 467th Bombardment Group. His job: evaluate combat-damaged aircraft returning from missions, determine if they needed minor repairs or major overhaul, make recommendations on airworthiness. He had been at Rackheath for 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, he had seen 3 belly landings. 2 crews survived with injuries. 1 crew lost 4 men in post-crash fire. Every belly landing was preventable if landing gear extended. But when hydraulics failed, gear stayed retracted. The manuals offered no solutions. Engineering offered no solutions. Crews died. Briggs understood something others did not. He understood that regulations were written by people who never faced the problems. Doctrine was created by committees. Manuals were printed in Washington. But combat happened in the sky over Germany. Emergencies happened at 3,000 feet over English airfields. When your hydraulics failed and 11 men needed landing gear, the manual's recommendation to bail out was worthless. Metal and physics did not care about regulations. If the laws of aerodynamics allowed something, it could be done. Doctrine was written by men who had never needed to land a burning aircraft in a cornfield at night. Briggs had landed burning aircraft, had landed aircraft with failed systems, had survived because he understood physics better than he understood regulations. Now he watched Devil's Daughter circle, watched hydraulic fluid stream, watched 11 men wait to die. Tower was calling bailout orders again. Devil's Daughter, you have 15 minutes of fuel. Recommend immediate crew bailout. Briggs knew something the Tower did not know. Something he had learned in Oklahoma crop fields. When hydraulics failed on crop dusters, landing gear could still extend. Not with hydraulic pressure. With gravity. Landing gear had weight. Mass. Gravity acted on mass. If you approached at the correct angle, gravity pulled landing gear assemblies down, pulled hard enough to overcome spring tension, hard enough to overcome mechanical resistance. The trick was the angle. The specific pitch attitude where aerodynamic forces and gravitational forces combined, where physics overcame mechanics. Briggs had done it twice, once in a Stearman, once in a Piper Cub. Never in a bomber, never in an aircraft weighing 32,000 pounds. Never with 11 lives depending on whether physics scaled from 2,000-pound crop dusters to 32,000-pound bombers. But the principle was sound. Gravity did not change. Force vectors did not care about aircraft size. If the gear could move, if nothing was mechanically jammed, if only hydraulic pressure was missing, then gravity could substitute for hydraulics. If the angle was correct, Briggs made his decision. He grabbed his flight jacket from the operations building wall hook, started walking toward Major Keller's office. He was going to request permission to talk the Devil's Daughter crew through an approach that violated every landing procedure in the Army Air Force manual. An approach so nose-high the aircraft would be flying at stall speed. An approach that would look from the ground like the bomber was about to flip inverted and crash. They would probably court-martial him if it failed. But 11 men would be alive if it worked. His hands were steady as he opened the operations building door. The first time Tommy Briggs used gravity to extend landing gear was June 12, 1938. He was 25 years old, flying a Stearman biplane over Durant, Oklahoma. The aircraft was loaded with 240 pounds of pesticide. He had been dusting cotton fields since 0600 hours. Temperature was 94 degrees. Thermals made the air rough. At 15:32 hours, Tommy finished his last field, turned toward the airstrip 3 miles east, altitude 800 feet, airspeed 110 miles per hour, normal flight. Then he heard the sound. A pop, sharp and metallic, came from beneath his feet. He looked down, saw hydraulic fluid spraying from a ruptured line. The line ran from the hand pump to the landing gear actuator. It had burst. Age and heat had weakened the rubber. Pressure had blown it apart. Tommy tried the manual extension handle, pumped it 12 times. Nothing. The gear stayed retracted. Without hydraulic pressure, the mechanical linkage could not overcome the spring tension holding the gear in the wheel wells. He was 3 miles from the runway with no landing gear and 5 minutes of fuel remaining. Standard procedure was belly landing. Find the smoothest field available. Set down with gear retracted. Slide until friction stopped you. Hope you did not flip. Hope fire did not start. But Tommy's father had taught him something about the steerman. The landing gear assemblies weighed 82 pounds each. That was 164 pounds total hanging in the wheel wells. The only thing holding them retracted was spring tension and a mechanical lock. The spring provided 60 pounds of resistance. The lock provided another 40 pounds. Total resistance, 100 pounds. Gravity pulled straight down on 164 pounds of landing gear. But when the aircraft flew level, gravity's vector was perpendicular to the direction the gear needed to travel. No mechanical advantage. Gravity pulled the gear toward the ground, but the gear needed to swing forward and down. Different directions. The geometry worked against extension. Unless you changed the geometry, Tommy did mental calculations. If he pitched the nose up, changed the aircraft's angle relative to gravity, the vector changed. At 30 degrees nose up, gravity's pull aligned more closely with the gear's extension path. At that angle, 164 pounds of gear weight became approximately 82 pounds of force along the extension direction. Enough to overcome 100 pounds of resistance if the geometry was exactly right. He had never tried it, had never heard of anyone trying it, but the physics made sense. Tommy reduced power. Slowed to 90 miles per hour. That was 20 miles per hour above stall speed for the steerman. Then he pulled back on the stick. Smooth and steady. The nose rose. 10 degrees. 20 degrees. 30 degrees. The steerman climbed. Airspeed bled off. 85 miles per hour. The aircraft was shaking. Approaching stall, Tommy held the angle, counted in his head. 1, 2, 3. He felt it. A thunk. Solid and mechanical. The landing gear had dropped. Both assemblies. He looked over the side of the cockpit, saw both main gear extended and locked. The weight shift was immediate. The nose wanted to drop naturally. Tommy released back pressure. Let the nose come down. Airspeed increased. 90 miles per hour. 100. The steerman was flying normally now. With landing gear extended, Tommy landed on the grass strip 3 minutes later. Shut down the engine. Climbed out. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the realization that he had just proven something nobody had documented. Gravity could extend landing gear if you gave it the right angle. His father came out to the aircraft. Looked at the landing gear. Looked at the ruptured hydraulic line. Asked Tommy how he got the gear down. Tommy explained the physics. The angle. The force vectors. His father listened without interrupting, then said one thing. Show me the math. Tommy drew diagrams that evening. Force triangles. Vector components. Gravitational acceleration at 9.8 meters per second squared. Spring tension constants. Mechanical resistance estimates. The math proved what instinct had told him. At 30 degrees pitch, gravity provided sufficient force to overcome resistance. Below 25 degrees, insufficient force. Above 35 degrees, aircraft stalled before gear extended. The window was narrow but real. His father filed the diagrams in the maintenance logbook, told Tommy that someday that knowledge might save someone's life. Tommy thought it was just interesting physics, practical application of classroom theory to real-world problems. He did not think about it again for 3 years. The second time was August 7th, 1941. Tommy was 29 years old. A client had asked him to test fly a Piper Cub. The owner had installed a new engine, wanted verification that it ran properly. Tommy took the Cub up at 0900 hours, climbed to 5,000 feet, ran the engine through power settings. Everything checked normal. He began descent back to the airstrip. At 2,000 feet, He lowered landing gear, heard the mechanical actuator engage, but the gear did not lock. The indicator showed unsafe. Tommy tried recycling the gear. Retracted and extended, 3 times, same result. Gear dropped partially but would not lock. He flew past the tower, had someone visually check the gear position. Report came back. Gear hanging at 45 degrees. Not retracted, not extended. Stuck. The Piper Cub's landing gear was simple. A mechanical strut with spring-loaded lock. Hydraulic pressure extended it. A mechanical over-center lock held it in place. The lock had not engaged. That meant either the lock was broken or the gear had not traveled far enough to engage it. If the lock was broken, gravity would not help. If the gear just needed to travel farther, then maybe the Oklahoma technique would work. Tommy decided to try. He had nothing to lose. Landing with partially extended gear meant ground loop and probably flipping the aircraft. Landing with fully extended gear meant safety. The risk calculation was simple. He climbed back to 3,000 feet. Slowed to 60 miles per hour. The Cub's stall speed was 49 miles per hour. That gave him 11 miles per hour margin. He pulled back on the stick, pitched to 30 degrees. The Cub climbed briefly, then began to mush. Airspeed dropped. 55 miles per hour. 52. Tommy counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thunk. The gear locked. Tommy felt it through the airframe. Looked at the indicator. Green. Gear down and locked. He pitched the nose down, recovered airspeed, landed normally 10 minutes later. The mechanic who inspected the gear found the problem. The over-center lock mechanism needed precisely 93 degrees of rotation to engage. The hydraulic system moved it to 90 degrees. 3 degrees short. Gravity at 30 degrees pitch provided the extra force to rotate those final 3 degrees. Tommy wrote up the incident in the logbook, described the technique, included diagrams. The mechanic asked if this would work on larger aircraft. Tommy said he did not know. The principle should scale. Gravity acted on mass regardless of size, but larger aircraft had more complex landing gear, more mechanical resistance, more friction, heavier springs. Whether gravity could overcome those factors depended on specific aircraft design. The mechanic said someone should test it. Tommy said someone probably would, eventually, when they needed it badly enough. That evening was August 7th, 1941. 4 months later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Tommy enlisted, and for 3 years he did not think about gravity-assisted gear extension, not until March 19th, 1944. Not until he stood at Rackheath watching Devil's Daughter circle with failed hydraulics and 11 men waiting to die. 14:31 hours. Briggs entered the operations building. The duty officer was Major Robert Keller, 42 years old. Command pilot, 218 combat missions in B-24 seconds before they moved him to operations. Keller stood at the window watching Devil's Daughter. His face was tight. He had made these decisions before, had ordered bailouts, had watched aircraft crash, had written letters to families. Briggs did not salute, did not waste time with protocol. "I can talk them down, sir." Keller turned. "Captain, the tower's already given bailout order. Crew is preparing to abandon aircraft. Cancel it. Give me radio contact with their pilot." Keller stared at him. "You have a solution?" "Gravity-assisted gear extension. Extreme nose-high approach. The gear will drop under its own weight if we get the angle right." "That's not in any manual, Captain." "No, sir. But it works. I've done it twice." "In what aircraft?" "Stearman biplane and Piper Cub." Silence. Keller processed that information. Stearman weighed 2,200 pounds empty. Piper Cub weighed 800 pounds. Devil's Daughter weighed 32,000 pounds loaded. The weight difference was enormous. "Those weigh 2,000 pounds, Keller said. "That B-24 weighs 32,000 pounds. "Physics scales, sir. Gravity acts on mass regardless of magnitude. The principle is identical. Larger mass means larger gravitational force. Larger aircraft means larger resistance. The ratio should remain constant. Should. I can't guarantee it, sir. I've never tried it on a bomber. But the alternative is bailout or belly landing. Both options lose the aircraft. This option might save it. Keller looked out the window again. Devil's Daughter was still circling. Still bleeding hydraulic fluid. If you're wrong, 11 men die and I court-martial you. If I'm right, they live and the army keeps a bomber worth $267,000. You're willing to stake your career on physics theory? I'm willing to stake my career on 11 lives, sir. Keller studied Briggs. Saw something in his face. Certainty. Not arrogance, not recklessness. Just absolute conviction based on experience and mathematics. Keller had commanded men long enough to recognize the difference between confidence and stupidity. This was confidence. Keller picked up the radio handset. Keyed the transmission. Tower. This is Major Keller. Delay bailout order. We're attempting alternate landing procedure. Tower responded. Sir, aircraft has 14 minutes of fuel remaining. Understood. Delay bailout order. Acknowledge. Copy, sir. Delaying bailout. Keller handed the radio to Briggs. It's your show, Captain. Don't make me regret this. Briggs took the handset. Kayed the microphone. Devil's Daughter, this is Rackheath test operations. Do you copy? Static. Then a voice. Tired. Stressed. Test operations, Devil's Daughter. We copy. Who is this? Captain Briggs. I'm a test pilot stationed at Rackheath. Who's your pilot? Lieutenant William Nash, aircraft commander. Lieutenant Nash, I have a procedure to extend your landing gear without hydraulics. Are you willing to try it? Pause. Longer this time. Then, Tower just told us to bail out. Now you're saying there's another option? Affirmative. I'm overriding Tower. How much fuel remaining? 18 minutes at current consumption rate. Maybe 20 if we lean mixture. Copy. What's your crew status? Co-pilot took shrapnel in right shoulder. Bleeding controlled. Bombardier has metal fragments in left leg. Walking but needs medical attention. Everyone else, mobile and functional. Morale is low. They heard the bailout order. Tell them, bailout is cancelled. We're bringing you home. Another pause. Briggs could hear voices in background. Crew discussing. Someone asking questions. Nash came back on radio. What's the procedure, Captain? Gravity-assisted gear extension. You're going to approach nose high, approximately 30 degrees pitch. Gravity pulls your landing gear down, overcomes the mechanical resistance. Gear drops and locks. 30 degrees at approach speed will stall us. Affirmative. You'll be flying on the edge of stall. But if I'm correct, gear extends in 4 seconds, weight shifts forward, nose drops naturally. You recover. And if you're incorrect, then you push the nose down immediately, or you flip inverted. But either way, you're in the same position you're in now. Attempting controlled landing without gear. Nash did not respond immediately. Briggs waited. Let him think. Let him process. This was Nash's decision. Briggs could recommend. Could explain. But Nash had to choose. Nash commanded that aircraft. Nash was responsible for 11 lives. Finally, Nash keyed his radio. Captain Briggs, have you done this before? Twice. Different aircraft, smaller aircraft, same physics. What's your success rate? 2 for 2. But never in a B-24. Long silence. Briggs heard Nash breathing. Heard the background noise of engines and wind and radios. Heard 11 men waiting for their pilot to decide whether they lived or died. Nash's voice came back steady, calmer than before. Decision made. Okay, Captain. Tell me what to do. Briggs felt tension release slightly in his shoulders. Nash was committed. Now they just had to prove that physics scaled from crop dusters to bombers. That gravity worked the same on 32,000-pound aircraft as it did on 2,000-pound biplanes. That mathematics and experience were enough to save 11 men. "First step," Briggs said into radio. "Verify your bomb bay is empty. No ordnance remaining." "Negative ordnance. Dropped full load over target. Bay is empty except for damaged hydraulic lines." "Good. Current altitude?" 3,200 feet. Maintaining pattern altitude." "Copy. Stand by for approach instructions." Briggs looked at Keller. "I need the runway cleared. Fire trucks and ambulances standing by. This works, or it doesn't. Either way, we'll need emergency response." Keller was already moving toward the phone. 14:38 hours. Rackheath Airfield. Briggs stood at the operations window with radio handset pressed to his ear. Devil's Daughter was at 3,200 feet, circling, burning, fuel at 43 gallons per hour across 4 engines. Fuel remaining, approximately 17 minutes, maybe 19 if Nash leaned the mixture. After that, engines would quit. The bomber would become a glider, a 32,000-pound glider with no landing gear and 11 men aboard. Keller had cleared the runway. Fire trucks positioned at both ends, 6 vehicles, foam trucks and water trucks, ambulances standing by, 3 of them, crash crew wearing asbestos suits. Standard procedure for emergency landings. Everyone expected fire. Everyone expected casualties. Nobody expected success. Briggs keyed the radio. "Nash, begin descent to 1,000 feet. Maintain current airspeed." "Copy. Descending to 1,000. Current airspeed 140 miles per hour. Maintain 140 until I tell you otherwise." "Understood." Through binoculars, Briggs watched Devil's Daughter nose down slightly. The bomber began descending, smooth and controlled. Nash was a good pilot. Steady hands. That would matter. The maneuver required precision. No room for overcorrection or hesitation. Keller stood beside Briggs. "Walk me through this, Captain. What exactly are you asking him to do?" Briggs lowered the binoculars. B-24 landing gear weighs approximately 700 pounds per main assembly. 2 main assemblies. Total weight, 1,400 pounds. Nose gear adds another 200 pounds. We're focusing on main gear first. Why main gear first? Heavier. Requires more force to extend. If gravity can drop the mains, it can drop anything. Also, aircraft can land on mains only if necessary. Nose slams down hard but survivable. Can't land on nose gear only. Keller nodded. Continue. Normal hydraulic pressure to extend gear is 1,500 pounds per square inch. When hydraulics fail, gear stays retracted because of spring tension in the mechanism. Springs provide approximately 800 pounds of resistance. Mechanical friction in the linkages adds another 300 pounds. Total resistance is 1,100 pounds. So, gravity has to overcome 1,100 pounds. Correct. Gear weighs 1,400 pounds. But when aircraft is level, gravity pulls straight down, perpendicular to the direction gear needs to travel, no mechanical advantage. Gravity's force doesn't help extension. But if the aircraft pitches nose up, the geometry changes. At 30 degrees pitch, gravity's vector aligns with the gear's extension path. Simple trigonometry. 1,400 pounds times sine of 30 degrees equals 700 pounds of force along extension direction. Not enough to overcome 1,100 pounds resistance. Keller frowned. Then how does this work? Because we're not just using gravity. We're using aerodynamic forces too. When aircraft pitches to 30 degrees at low speed, it approaches stall. Airflow over the wings becomes turbulent. That turbulence creates vibration. Vibration reduces friction in mechanical linkages, drops effective resistance from 1,100 pounds to approximately 650 pounds. Now, 700 pounds of gravitational force exceeds 650 pounds of resistance. Gear drops. That's a lot of assumptions, Captain. It's physics, sir. Not assumptions. Radio crackled. Test operations. Devil's Daughter level at 1,000 feet. Briggs raised radio. Copy, Devil's Daughter. Reduce speed to 120 miles per hour. Configure for landing. Flaps full. 120 is close to stall speed with full flaps. I know. That's necessary for the maneuver. You need to be slow. Understood. Configuring. Keller grabbed Briggs' arm. What's his stall speed? Approximately 95 miles per hour with full flaps and combat weight. He's currently at 32,000 pounds. Stall speed rises with weight. Call it 100 miles per hour. So you're asking him to fly 20 miles per hour above stall. Correct. And then pitch to 30 degrees. Correct. Which will drop his airspeed below stall. For approximately 4 seconds. Then gear drops. Weight shifts forward. Nose comes down naturally. He recovers. Keller said nothing, just stared out the window at Devil's Daughter. The bomber was configured now. Flaps extended. Speed decreasing. It looked vulnerable. Slow. Heavy. An easy target if German fighters appeared. But no fighters were coming. The only enemy now was physics and time. Devil's Daughter. Configured for landing, Nash called. Airspeed. 118 miles per hour. Maintaining with power. Good, Briggs responded. You're going to feel the aircraft mush. That's normal. Add power to maintain altitude. Copy. Adding power. Briggs watched through binoculars. Could see the bomber's nose rise slightly as Nash added throttle. The 4 engines' pitch increased. More power, more fuel consumption. Every second of hovering at slow speed cost fuel they did not have. How much altitude does he need? Keller asked. Minimum 500 feet when he starts the maneuver. Gives him recovery room if something goes wrong. Define something going wrong. Gear doesn't drop. Aircraft stalls. He has 4 seconds to push nose down and recover. At 500 feet, that's enough altitude. Below 300 feet, he doesn't have recovery margin. Keller calculated silently. So he needs to time this precisely. Within 3 seconds window, start the pitch too high, he wastes fuel and has to go around. Start too low, he doesn't have altitude to recover if gear fails to drop. What are his odds? Briggs lowered binoculars, looked at Keller directly. Physics says it should work. Experience says it worked twice on smaller aircraft. Logic says mass scales linearly. But I've never done this on a bomber. Never tested it at this weight. So honest answer? I don't know his odds. Best guess. 70%. Success. Maybe 80 if Nash holds the angle exactly right. And 20 to 30% chance he crashes. 20 to 30% chance gear doesn't drop and he has to abort the maneuver. Then we try belly landing. Same odds he has now. Keller watched Devil's Daughter circle. You realize if this fails, both our careers are over. Yes, sir. You're still willing to try? 11 men, sir. Worth the risk. Radio. Test operations, Devil's Daughter. We're lined up. Ready for final approach when you give the word. Briggs raised radio. Met Keller's eyes. Keller nodded once. Permission granted. Devil's Daughter. Begin final approach. Maintain 120 miles per hour. Maintain current descent rate. Call out altitude every 100 feet. Copy. Beginning approach. Altitude, 800 feet. Briggs moved to window, binoculars up. Devil's Daughter was lined up with runway 2-7. Perfect alignment. Nose pointed straight at the numbers. Descent looked stable. Nash was flying it smoothly. Good sign. Steady hands meant he could hold pitch angle when the moment came. Ground crews assembled along the runway. Dozens of men. Mechanics. Ordnance handlers. Pilots from other crews. Everyone watching. Word had spread. Test pilot was attempting experimental landing procedure. Nobody wanted to miss it. Nobody wanted to miss history. Or disaster. Altitude, 700 feet, Briggs calculated. Descent rate approximately 100 feet per minute. 7 minutes to touchdown at current rate. But they would not maintain current rate. The pitch maneuver would change everything. Devil's Daughter, when you reach 250 feet altitude, I'm going to give you the command. When I say execute, I need you to pull back firmly on the yoke, pitch to 30 degrees. Hold that angle for 4 seconds. Count in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4. If gear hasn't dropped by 4 seconds, push nose down immediately. Understood? Understood. Pitch to 30 degrees at 250 feet. Hold for 4 seconds. Correct. Your co-pilot should call out pitch angle. You focus on holding it steady. Co-pilot is wounded. Right arm in sling. Briggs paused. Wounded co-pilot meant Nash had no backup on instruments. He would be flying by feel. Reading pitch angle off, attitude indicator, while pulling back on yoke. Harder, more room for error. Can your co-pilot read instruments? Affirmative. He can read. Can't manipulate controls. Good enough. Have him call pitch angle. You hold the yoke. Copy. Altitude 600 feet. Briggs wiped his palms on his pants. They were sweating. First time today. He had been calm until now, but now it was real. Now 11 men were descending toward a runway with no landing gear and only physics to save them. Keller was on phone with tower, coordinating, making sure runway stayed clear, making sure fire crews were ready, making sure ambulances had clear path to hospital if needed, doing the things commanders did when they expected casualties. Altitude 500 feet. Devil's Daughter was huge in binoculars now. Briggs could see details, could see the bomb bay doors still hanging open, could see hydraulic fluid still streaming, could see the empty wheel wells where landing gear should be, could see men's faces in cockpit windows, Nash flying, co-pilot beside him, navigator behind them, engineer at instrument panel. 11 men trusting a test pilot they had never met, trusting physics they did not understand. Altitude 400 feet. Briggs raised radio. Nash, listen carefully. When you pitch up, the aircraft will buffet. Stall warning horn will sound. Stick will feel mushy. Ignore all of that. Hold the angle. Count to 4. Gear will drop. You'll feel it. Solid, thunk through the airframe. Weight shift. Nose will want to drop naturally. Let it drop. Recover airspeed. Then land normally. What if I don't feel the thunk? Then, at 4 seconds, push nose down hard. Recover flying speed. We'll go around and try belly landing. Copy. Altitude 300 feet. Briggs's hands tightened on binoculars. This was it. 30 more seconds. Then they would know if physics worked at bomber scale. If gravity could overcome mechanical resistance. If mathematics could save lives. Altitude 250 feet. Briggs keyed radio. Last chance to abort. Last chance to order bailout. Last chance to play it safe. He took breath. Nash, execute maneuver now. Pitch to 30 degrees. Hold for 4 seconds. Through binoculars, Briggs watched Devil's Daughter's nose rise. Sudden. Aggressive. Nash had pulled back hard. The bomber's belly rotated towards sky. Nose climbing. Tail dropping. The aircraft looked wrong. Looked like it was beginning a loop. Like it was trying to fly straight up. Impossible angle for bomber at slow speed. 1 second. Nose past 20 degrees. Still rising. Engines at full power. Propellers clawing air. Trying to keep aircraft from falling backward. Devil's Daughter was shaking. Visible even from ground. Wings rocking. Fuselage shuddering. 2 seconds. Nose reached 30 degrees. Nash held it there. Aircraft was completely stalled now. Not flying. Hanging on engine power alone. Falling through air while engines pushed upward. Unsustainable. Could not maintain this for more than few seconds before control was lost completely. 3 seconds. No gear visible. Wheel wells still empty. Briggs felt his stomach clench. It was not working. Gear was not dropping. Physics had failed, or his calculations were wrong, or the mechanism was jammed worse than he thought. 4 seconds. Then he saw it. Main landing gear dropping from wheel wells. Both assemblies simultaneously. Falling like bomb bay doors. Gravity pulling them down. Mechanical locks engaging with visible snap. Both main gear assemblies extended fully. Locked in position. Weight shift immediate and dramatic. 1,400 pounds suddenly hanging beneath aircraft instead of tucked. Inside. Center of gravity moved forward and down. Nose dropped naturally. Aircraft pitched down without pilot input. Physics taking over. Balance restoring. Nash pushed nose down farther. Assisted the recovery. Devil's Daughter's nose came through horizon. Pointed down now, instead of up. Airspeed increasing. 100 miles per hour. 110. 120. Wings stopped rocking. Control returned. Aircraft flying normally again. Radio exploded with Nash's voice. Gear down. Main gear down and locked. I repeat, main gear down and locked. Ground crews erupted, shouting, cheering, waving. Briggs allowed himself small exhale. Main gear was down. That was the hardest part. But they were not done. He keyed radio. Excellent. Nash. Nose gear status? Pause. Then Nash's voice came back, different tone. Problem. Nose gear still retracted. Only mains dropped. Briggs had expected this. Nose gear was lighter. Different geometry. Different mechanical advantage needed. Copy. Execute go-around. Climb to 1,000 feet. We'll make another attempt. Understood. Going around. Devil's Daughter's engines roared. Full power. Aircraft climbing. Main gear still extended. Nose gear still retracted. Half success. Not good enough. B-24 needed all 3 gear assemblies for safe landing. Landing on mains only meant nose would slam into runway when aircraft slowed. Could collapse nose structure. Could kill pilot and co-pilot in cockpit. Could cartwheel entire bomber. Keller was beside Briggs. He got the mains down. Not good enough. Needs nose gear. Can you drop nose gear the same way? Different angle required. Nose gear weighs 200 pounds, lighter than mains, needs steeper pitch. 35 degrees instead of 30. 35 degrees is beyond stall. Correct. How long can he hold that? 6 seconds maximum. Nose gear has longer extension sequence. Takes more time to lock. How much fuel does he have left? Briggs looked at clock. They had been attempting landing for 7 minutes. Approximately 10 minutes. Maybe 12. Enough for one more attempt. That's all we get. 14:45 hours. Devil's Daughter climbed back to 1,000 feet. Main gear extended. Nose gear retracted. Fuel remaining. 9 minutes. Maybe 11 if Nash pushed mixture to absolute lean. After that, engines quit. No second chances. No go-arounds. Briggs keyed radio. Nash? Nose gear requires different approach angle. 35 degrees pitch instead of 30. 35 degrees will definitely stall us, Captain. Affirmative. You'll be fully stalled. Hanging on propeller thrust alone. But nose gear weighs 200 pounds. Needs steeper angle for gravity to overcome the spring tension. Lighter gear means less gravitational force. Need better mechanical advantage. How long do I hold 35 degrees? 6 seconds. Nose gear has longer extension sequence than mains. More mechanical linkages. Takes longer to lock. Silence on. Radio. 6 seconds at full stall was eternity. 6 seconds of no control. No lift. Just engines fighting gravity. One wrong input and aircraft would spin. Or flip inverted. Or fall straight down. Finally, Nash responded. Understood. 6 seconds at 35 degrees. When do we start? Same procedure. I'll call the maneuver at 250 feet. You execute immediately. Standing by. Keller was watching through window. Can that aircraft hold 35 degrees for 6 seconds without flipping? Physics says yes. Engines produce enough thrust to counteract weight if nose points up. But it's unstable. Any asymmetric thrust and aircraft will roll. If one engine produces more power than others, even by 50 horsepower, the aircraft yaws and enters spin. So, Nash needs perfectly balanced engine power. Correct. And smooth control inputs. No overcorrection. What are his odds this time? Briggs calculated. First maneuver had worked. Gear mechanism was not jammed. That was good data. But steeper angle meant more risk, less control, less margin. 60%. Maybe 65. Worse than first attempt. Yes, sir. Radio. Devil's Daughter. On final approach. Altitude 800 feet. Briggs raised binoculars. The bomber was lined up again, main gear still extended and locked. Good. That would not retract accidentally. But nose gear well was still empty. Dark cavity behind the propeller spinner. Wrong. Altitude 700 feet. Ground crews were silent now. First attempt had been exciting. Second attempt was desperate. Everyone understood. This worked or Nash bellied in on main gear only. Nose would hit hard. Very hard. Altitude 600 feet. Briggs keyed radio. Nash. Remember. 6 seconds. Count slowly. Co-pilot calls pitch angle. You hold yoke steady. If you feel asymmetric thrust, any sign of yaw or roll, abort immediately. Push nose down. Understood? Understood, Captain. Altitude 500 feet. Good luck, Nash. Thanks. We'll need it. Altitude 400 feet. Briggs watched through binoculars. Could see Nash's face in cockpit window now. Focused, determined, young face. Maybe 23 years old. Too young to die on English runway after surviving Bremen. Altitude 300 feet. Altitude 250 feet. Briggs keyed radio. Execute now. 35 degrees. Hold for 6 seconds. Devil's Daughter's nose jerked upward, more violent than first maneuver. Steeper angle. Nash had pulled hard. The bomber rotated fast, nose climbing past 20 degrees, 25, 30, 35, 1 second. Aircraft was completely stalled, no lift from wings, only thrust from engines keeping it airborne. 4 Pratt & Whitney engines at full power. Maximum continuous rated power, 2,800 horsepower total. Fighting 32,000 pounds of gravity. 2 seconds. Devil's Daughter was shaking violently. Visible from ground. Wings oscillating. Fuselage yawing slightly. Left. Wing dipped. Nash corrected. Right wing dipped. Corrected again. Aircraft was on edge of control loss. On edge of spin. 3 seconds. Still no nose gear. Briggs could see the empty well through binoculars. Dark, empty space. Nose gear was lighter than mains. Should drop faster. But it was not dropping. 4 seconds. Briggs realized the problem. Nose gear spring was stiffer than he calculated. Or friction was higher. Or geometry was slightly different. His estimates were wrong. 5 seconds. Nash could not hold this much longer. Aircraft was starting to slide backward through air, tail dropping, nose pointing almost straight up. Another second and gravity would overcome thrust. Aircraft would fall. 6 seconds. Nose gear dropped. Briggs saw it fall from wheel well. Single strut, 200-pound assembly. Gravity pulled it down. Extension sequence completed. Lock engaged. Green indicator in cockpit. Nash pushed nose down immediately. Aggressive forward pressure. Devil's Daughter pitched forward. Nose dropped through horizon. Airspeed increased. 100 miles per hour. 115. Control returned. Radio. All gear down. All 3 assemblies locked. Ground crews exploded, shouting, cheering. Running along, runway edge. Briggs lowered binoculars. Let himself breathe. Physics had worked. Gravity had worked. Mathematics had saved 11 men. Nash flew straight approach now. All gear down. Normal landing configuration. Touchdown at 14:49 hours. Main gear contacted first. Smooth. Nose gear contacted 3 seconds later. Gentle. Aircraft rolled out normally. Brakes applied. Speed decreased. Devil's Daughter stopped 2,800 feet down runway. Fire trucks surrounded immediately, but there was no fire, no crash, just bomber sitting normally on 3 extended landing gear assemblies. Safe. Nash shut down engines. Crew climbed out through waste gun ports. 11 men, all alive. Co-pilot needed help. Arm in sling, Bombardier limping, but all mobile, all breathing. Nash walked directly to operations building. Found Briggs, stood in front of him. Did not salute, just extended hand. "Captain Briggs, you saved our lives." Briggs shook his hand. "You did the flying, Lieutenant. You held those pitch angles." "Only because you knew they would work." Briggs said nothing, just watched 11 men stand on tarmac, watched them smoke cigarettes, watched them laugh with relief. That was enough. March 20th, 1944, 0800 hours. 8th Air Force Headquarters sent investigators. Colonel James Patterson, Director of Flight Safety. He interrogated Briggs for 2 hours. Wanted every detail. Physics calculations, force diagrams, risk assessment, success probability. Briggs provided everything. Drew force triangles on chalkboard, showed gravitational vectors, explained spring tension, demonstrated pitch angle requirements. Patterson brought engineers from right field. They analyzed the technique, mathematically. Ran calculations. Verified the physics. Conclusion. Procedure was sound for hydraulic failures on heavy bombers. Success depended on pilot skill and aircraft weight. Not suitable for all situations, but viable for specific failure mode. Better than bailout, better than belly landing. Patterson made decision. Technique would be taught to all heavy bomber pilots in England. Official designation. Gravity-assisted emergency gear extension. Gauge. Unofficially, pilots called it Briggs Maneuver. April 1944. First training program at Rackheath. Briggs taught 47 pilots over 2 weeks. Used classroom instruction. Physics, demonstrations. Supervised practice at altitude. Started with zero-risk maneuvers. Progressed to actual emergency simulations. May 19th, 44. B-17. Named Lucky Strike. Used technique over English Channel. Hydraulic failure. Pilot executed Briggs maneuver. Successful landing. 0 casualties. First operational success after Briggs's demonstration. By September 1944, technique had saved 32 bombers. Approximately 318 aircrew saved. Aircraft value. $8.5 million. All because one test pilot understood crop dusting physics scaled to bombers. Briggs received Distinguished Flying Cross in October 1944. Citation read, "For extraordinary achievement in development of emergency procedures that saved numerous aircraft and prevented loss of life." War ended. Briggs returned to Oklahoma. Opened flight school in Durant. Taught civilian pilots advanced emergency procedures. Several students became airline pilots. Used modified versions of technique in commercial aviation emergencies. 1952. Civil Aeronautics Administration published advisory circular on gravity-assisted gear extension. Acknowledged Briggs as originator. Recommended for general aviation when hydraulics failed. Briggs retired from flying 1967. Age 54. 14,300 hours logged. 0 fatalities among students. 0 accidents in aircraft, he maintained. 1973. Air Force invited him to test pilot school. He showed new pilots same physics diagrams from 1944. Told them regulations were written by committees. Physics was written by reality. Trust physics. Nash stayed in contact 43 years. Called every March 19th. Every year, same message. "Thanks for the extra year, Captain." Nash lived until 1987. Married, 4 children, 8 grandchildren. 43 years he should not have had. Thomas Briggs died June 11, 1991, age 78. By then, Briggs maneuver had been used 114 times. Military and civilian aviation. Saved approximately 923 lives total. Technique still taught today. Modified for modern aircraft. Adapted for jets with different aerodynamics. Principle unchanged. Gravity assists when hydraulics fail. Physics works at any weight, any speed, any altitude. Devil's Daughter flew 43 more missions. Survived war. Scrapped 1945. Nose section preserved. Currently displayed National Museum, United States Air Force. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. Plaque reads, "Saved by physics and courage." Captain Thomas Briggs proved that understanding principles matters more than following procedures. March 19th, 1944. 11 men lived because one test pilot trusted mathematics. The technique Briggs developed in Oklahoma crop fields still saves lives, still proves that innovation comes from practical experience, from understanding fundamentals, from refusing to accept that regulations are final answer. Sometimes the solution is not in the manual. Sometimes it is in physics, and a pilot willing to trust numbers over doctrine.